I don't know if you know this, but preaching here can be a bit of a tough gig. It's not because you're unresponsive or not encouraging. You are encouraging, you give good feedback. It's good. It's got more to do with the fact that you're a congregation, if I can generalise, you are well-educated, highly intelligent, biblically literate, well-churched, deep thinkers. And you already know most of the stuff that we could possibly preach from the front here because you've learnt all this already. And so we actually have to work really hard, Kevin and I, to try and find new insights that you may not have heard before for you to go, oh, that's interesting, and to keep learning and growing. And even when we do preach, we find something interesting, you don't like easy answers. You critique easy answers. You actually want to explore the depths of an issue or a passage as well. And I'm not saying this to be critical or mean to you. I actually love this about this church, that you do like to go that step further. And I like it because you do push Kevin and myself. We have to go deeper in our preaching, go further in our preaching. We have to read more, think more, tackle the tough issues, and that's a good thing. But if there's one drawback of this approach, it's that sometimes we skim over the basic stuff. Sometimes we sort of assume that you already know all the basic stuff. And so we skim over that really fast, and then we get to the interesting stuff or the new perspective or, wrestle with the difficult issue stuff. But I'm not going to do that today, partly because our Bible reading is the basic stuff that's really good. And secondly, I think it's good every now and again to just go over this core gospel message that Paul just preached in Romans chapters 5 and 6. Romans chapter 5 is one of those classic chapters of the Bible where Paul covers a whole bunch of stuff. In his letter to teaching the church of Rome, he's highlighting this important need for us to be saved by our faith in Jesus Christ. Paul sets this up in Romans 5 to say if we're trying to be made right by following the law, it's not going to work. A, because none of us are perfect, and B, because the law has no power to save in the first place. The law is only there to show that we have fallen short of God's standard and that we need help. And so Romans chapter 5 declares that the only way that we could be made right with God is through our faith in Jesus. None of us can earn our own righteousness. None of us can earn God's grace. But that's okay, because God gifts it to us. God has already done it. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Our Bible reading holds up this pattern. The NIV reading NIRV reading didn't mention the name Adam, but in the other readings it does. So it sets up Adam against another person, Jesus. But I liked what the NIRV version did, because really this is a representative of all of us. Adam is representative of all of us. And so it sets up these two people next to each other and said that we brought sin into the world, but Jesus brought grace into the world. We, through our act of rebellion, bring death, but Jesus, through his righteous act of the cross, brings grace. So you can see what Paul's doing, isn't it? Setting up these two people. It is a simple yet profound message. We are made right through our faith in God. But I know you want more, don't you? I've just done the basic stuff and you're going, yeah, but show me something a little bit more complex. All right. How do we understand verses 13 and 14 of that Bible passage then? What is it trying to say? That sin was in the world before the law was given to Moses, but sin was not charged to anybody's account before then. How does that work? And didn't the people in Noah's time get condemned because they were sinning. So therefore they were held account to their sin, weren't they? And what does it mean when it says that death reigns over those who did not sin? What does that even mean? Do you do this when you hear the Bible reading? Does your brain suddenly goes, yeah, okay, I understand that part, but what is that about? What is that about? This is my interpretation. You can debate with me later what your interpretation of this is, but I think Paul is saying that sin is much more of whether or not we actually break a commandment or not, or break one of the laws or not. So Paul is trying to say, before Moses was given the law, you couldn't break the law because the law didn't exist. But there was still sin there, and that was still causing problems, because sin is actually about the way that we relate to God, what's happening within our own lives and our own heart and our connection with God. And that still counted before the time of Moses. And so when he said death still reigned over people, yes, because people had broken relationships with God. It didn't matter that the law had been given or not, because their own connection with God, their own relationship with God was fractured. The Lord just came along and highlighted that for us. But the good news of God's grace is that the people back then, the people before Moses, and even us can find grace and forgiveness and reconciliation through Jesus, through grace. And all of that is beautifully summed up in that extra verse I tacked on in the end, Romans 6:23, that says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord." Does something jump out of you in that? Anyone? Can anyone see it? Sitting right in the middle there. The gifts of God, there is our phrase that we're doing at the moment, our program. It's actually in the Bible a lot. This idea that this is the gift of God. Eternal life given to us by God's grace through what Jesus has done on the cross. What an amazing gift. Liking this so far? Excellent. But let's just tap into this idea of a gift a little bit more. We have been given an amazing gift, and when you come to the dessert anywhere, if you've been to one already, you will hear me say, we get a pretty good deal out of this. God offers us everything. Grace, love, joy, peace, presence, everything. And all God asks for us in return is for us to love God back and to love others. That's it. It's like we're sitting there going, you give us all this and you ask us to simply love God and love others. What a deal. What a deal. What an amazing gift. It's a little bit like Oprah when, those shows when she gives stuff away, but far, far more excessive. I'm going to move over here. Is my mic still on now? Yep. So we could imagine God saying, do you want some love? Here, I've got a bucket full of love for you. You want love? There it is. You want more? God says, sure. I'll give you life. Not only life now, but life forever. And this is abundantly full. He said, more? Sure. I will give you hope and purpose and peace and guidance. I can give you all of that. Here's another bucket full of stuff for you. More? Sure. Forgiveness. That's why we've got the big cross up the front there, isn't it? To remind us of the forgiveness that God has given us. It's almost like grace. Not only do you get grace, you get grace, and you get grace, and you get grace. We all get grace. Gee, if I was Oprah, you'd be all cheering by now, wouldn't you? We all get grace. Yay! And we suddenly start to go, wow, you can start to see this generosity of God. But God doesn't stop there. God continues to give out buckets full of stuff. Things like time. We may not think that time is a blessing, but it is. Every single day we get the blessing of time in our lives. We also get skills and talents and abilities that God has given us, things that we can do, a bit like Bailey and her painting. we've been given stuff that we can do. God goes, you want more? We've been given education and intellect and reason and our ability to think through things. That also gives us opportunities and freedom. And I put in technology there because I think technology is an amazing blessing that our generation has got. Do you want more? We keep going. God gives us money. We don't like talking about this in church, do we? But we have. We have been given lots of resources. And even if you're sitting there going, yeah, but I didn't have much, in comparison to the world, we have got buckets full of money. Buckets full. Keep going. We've been given family and friends and the blessing that is. Today on Father's Day, we're acknowledging that, aren't we? The different ways that people have shared in our lives, whether they're our fathers or the people who have fathered us. We have got family and friends around us who are supporting us. We have got connections with the different communities and community groups and different groups of people that we relate to, and they support us and we support them. How are we going so far? Am I making the point? This one is particularly for young people, but I think we still all have it, don't we? Passion. That thing that sits inside of you that really lights your fire and you go, I want to make a difference in this area. We've been given passion, and that's a blessing. We've been given energy and focus. No. I hadn't practiced it up this high. Right. Anyway, we will cope, but you're getting the point. I've still got one more. I have to put it somewhere. Anyway, the buckets full of blessings are so overflowing. No, that's not the last one. Here's the last one. Our faith, isn't it? And all of these are blessings from God. And, well, have I made my point? It's not just a little bit of blessings here. These are bucketfuls of blessings, so much that I can't even make my pyramid out of it. But that's what God does for us, that God continues to bless us and bless us and bless us, and sometimes we need to see an illustration of that to just cement it in our head just how generous God has been with his blessings to us. Our God is a generous God. And the point is that God just doesn't give us a bucket and go, there we go, you've been blessed, I'm out of here now. That God continues to hand over the buckets full of blessings. That blessing of time comes every single day. It's no wonder that Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 15, Paul, being such a verbose person who's got lots of words and is able to craft huge long letters, says, thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. It's almost like Paul's going, I don't have the words. I can't find the right thing to say just how amazing this gift is. You getting this? As I said, we have the cross up the front of our church to constantly remind us not only that Jesus died for us, but to remind us of God's gift for us. When Jesus said that he had come to give life, he didn't just say that, did he? What did he say? Life in all its fullness. Abundant life. Buckets full of life. The gift of God to us, God's love and grace and all these things that didn't stand in my pyramid, are so generous, so excessive, so amazing that even after 50 years of experience in this, we're still going to be like Paul and go, we don't have the right words. It's indescribable, this indescribable gift of God. And what does God ask for in return? For us to simply love God back and to love others. I think part of my response and what we've been being encouraged for the last few weeks here is a part of our response also is to think about the gifts of God that we have received and how we use them to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms? If God has given us his bucketfuls of blessings, how do we use these bucketful of blessings to serve others? How can we be faithful stewards of all this blessing that we have received? And that's the challenge. That is the challenge that we've been asked to reflect upon during this Gift of God program. How that we use this overwhelming continual blessing from God to serve others. And I could probably finish the sermon just here, couldn't I? Because that's been good. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I just need to add a couple of things on the end. Because while we would agree that God continually blesses us and gives us buckets of blessings, at the same time, we've got a lot of things in our life that call upon these buckets of blessings, don't we? That also demand things from us. Our work demands our time and passion and energy. Our families need our love and focus. Our household responsibilities require time. And I could go on. There are lots of things that ask of these buckets of blessings. People, groups, circumstances are all asking for our energy, our time, our love, our money, our passion. And now I'm up the front saying that God's asking us to use some of this to serve others as well. And maybe you're going, yeah, I agree, but I just don't know how I'm going to fit it in. Because there's a lot of stuff already being asked of me, and now you're asking me to find space to serve others. I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? It goes back to that God pie video we watched in week 1, where we're sort of going, how do we split up these bucketfuls of blessings that we've got in the different ways that we need to be using them in all aspects of our life? Take time, for example. I don't know where time is in there anymore because it all fell down. Every day we get 1,440 minutes in our bucket of blessing. Every day we get that. And we get to decide how we share that bucket of blessing of time. We can't add any more time to that bucket. It's always the same. So it's not like, oh, it's okay, I will just try harder and then I'll have more time. No, we have to prioritise it. We have to sort of go, all right, well, how much do we give to the different things that I need to give time to? And we need to make sure that things like our work doesn't gobble it all up and just say, oh, well, we have to work and so therefore we have to give it all our time. No, we need to be able to say, yes, we need to give what we need to give to work, but we are prioritising other things as well. And that doesn't just work with time, that works with every of those buckets there. And there's another complication I should probably mention as well. I've had several conversations with people over the last 6 months who've been really struggling with low energy, low motivation, low spirituality, low, well, almost everything. But particularly low enjoyment of work and low enjoyment of life. It's almost like we've got holes in our buckets at the moment. And for some people, it's just running out and there's not much in the bucket at all. And there hasn't been for some time. Do you know people like this? Can you relate to it yourself? Yeah, unfortunately I can. And I don't like talking about this too much, but a couple of months ago, I was not in a good place at all. For me, it was like the last few years had asked a lot of me. And I had got to a point physically, emotionally and spiritually that there was not much left in any of my buckets. I felt like I had nothing left to give, and it was scaring me a little because it was playing out in interesting ways. I noticed that I was not enjoying my ministry, and I love doing ministry. I also noticed that I wasn't very hopeful for the future, which is not like me at all. I wouldn't say I had burned out, but my doctor and my professional supervisors said that I did. they both said if you want to go on caring for others, you need to also care for yourself. My professional supervisor strongly recommended that I should immediately take some extended leave, get myself back into a good place so that I can continue to serve and to do ministry well. I argue I couldn't because I had the gifts of God coming up and there was too much happening and it couldn't happen. We went back and forwards and compromised, and after a conversation with Kevin and some conversations with church council, in 2 weeks' time I'm taking a month off to get myself back into that right place. As I said, I don't like admitting I'm not coping. It's not something I enjoy doing. And I need to say I've been better since the decision's been made, but I can still see elements within me that I'm going, it's not right yet. I'm not there. This needs to happen. As I said, I don't like admitting this, but I wanted to do it because I know there's other people doing this the same as well, who are struggling with this as well. And I need to say, if you've been in a dark place like me, I encourage you to work out what you need to do to get back into the place, a good place too. I just keep hearing the words of my supervisor and my doctor over and over that says, if we want to keep serving others, we also need to care for ourselves. During the week, I found a really helpful Twitter thread. I'll try and post it on our feeds later on for you. But it was just some really practical advice for people who are feeling a bit run down, or in our terms, our buckets seem to be a little bit empty at the moment. And they gave some practical hints that I thought were worth just throwing quickly up on the screen. So this person was suggesting that we should make sure we're getting good physical rest. He was suggesting 7 hours a day. He did say you could include some of that in a nap, so that's helpful. He said take moments of the day to break whatever we're doing by stretching or going for a walk or meditating. Intentionally build on those friendships which give you energy, those friendships where you can be authentic, be yourself, that you don't have to, put on a mask. He said invest in those friendships. He said give yourself some sensory rest from social media or from Zoom. He said turn off notifications for a while. And then he said appreciate creativity or beauty. He said go for a walk in nature. Go to an art gallery. It's nice that we had art here already. He said go to a museum. Do some stuff which just helps you appreciate the beauty and the creativity of life. He had one more that I found really interesting, especially in the light of our 1 Peter 4:10 reading, where he said we should volunteer, that we should do something where we feel like we're making a difference in the world around us, in our communities or in people's lives. He said, if you are a person of faith, invest in that too. I'm just sort of going, he's saying what we're saying in this program, isn't he? He's saying, if you want your buckets to be filled, then find some time to serve others. We're actually going to look at that next week in our last of our series next week. I actually think that these two ideas that I've been talking about today do sit together. Yes, Peter is saying, we've been given buckets full of blessings. Let's use the gifts of God to serve others as faithful stewards of the blessings we've been given. But I also think that sits next to this idea that we need to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to be in the right place, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that we can do that the best. And how we bring those two things together is important. And it is about priorities. It is about saying, we're going to make sure that we invest in the things that are helpful for us. As I said before, we need to make sure that the major commitments or our work isn't grabbing all of these things and we just feel like we have to go along with it. But that we're doing the right priority or balance of our buckets of blessings that's helpful for us and helpful in our desire to serve others. And that includes, as I mentioned in the dessert evenings when you come to one of those, or if you've been to one already, how we resource the mission of God in the church. I know I've said a lot, but I just want to loop back to the beginning of my talk again to remind us of the amazing truth of the gospel, of God's overwhelming love and grace shown through Jesus. We might have the challenge of how do we prioritise this bucketfuls of blessings, but let's remember where the blessings have come from in the first place. That God has generously dumped this bucketfuls of blessings into our life. And we give thanks for that.